Welcome to TRT World's post-election special. I'm Tatiana Anderson. This week, Donald Trump stunned the world as he won the race to be America's next president. The 2016 election exposed a country that's deeply divided by politics, race, gender, culture, and economics. A nation split into two large coalitions, roughly equal in size, but vastly different in demographics and desires. All across the country, thousands of people have taken to the streets, fueled by fear and frustration and anger. They believe that by electing Trump, their country is cascading into a dark and divisive era. Over the next half hour, we'll be looking in detail at the reason for Trump's win and what it means for the country. But first, we'll start right here in Washington, D.C., where the political transition kicked off on Thursday with a meeting between President Barack Obama and the president-elect, Donald Trump. Colin Campbell takes a closer look.
From his residence in New York City, Donald Trump is assembling his transition team. After Republican victories in the White House and Congress, the party will look at its agenda and what it wants to accomplish in its first 100 days. Republicans plan to move aggressively with little to stand in their way. They will examine how to implement Trump initiatives under a unified government. Cutting taxes, confirming conservative judges, shrinking government programs, and rolling back regulations. President Barack Obama greeted President-elect Trump at the White House on Thursday. An awkward greeting. Trump led the movement years ago to disqualify Obama's candidacy by saying he wasn't born in the U.S. It wasn't quite the election outcome Obama had desired, but he said he was committed to a smooth transition for the incoming president.
It is important for all of us, regardless of party and regardless of political preferences, to now come together, work together to deal with the many challenges that we face.
We discussed a lot of different situations, some wonderful and some difficulties. I very much look forward to dealing with the president in the future.
Obama knows his legacy now hangs in the balance.
For President Barack Obama, Republican victories in Congress and the White House are not good news, as Republicans have already demonstrated they have the votes they need to replace Obamacare without Democrats' help, as other Obama-led initiatives are in peril under a Trump presidency. But as Trump determines his next moves, part of the United States are in turmoil. Dozens of protests have sprung up nationwide from New York to California. Demonstrators are upset over Trump's victory over the Washington, D.C. fixture, Democrat Hillary Clinton.
As a white woman in the United States, it's my responsibility to make a stand not just for myself, but for all the other people that are going to be directly affected by Trump presidency.
As Trump prepares to assume the power of the presidency, many wonder what his cabinet will look like and how the United States will be shaped in the age of Trump. Colin Campbell, TRT World, Washington.
I am joined now by Christopher Harris. He is the executive director of Unhyphenated America. He's also a Republican. I'm also here with David Mitchell. He is a lawyer and the author of a new book out called We Hold These Truths, and he is a Democrat. And David, I want to start with you. Before the election, you wrote about how America actually needs Donald Trump. Why did you say that, and how are you feeling now?
You know, I think that in America, what we've seen in the Democratic Party in particular, is a failure to meet the most pressing requirements and demands of African Americans. They come around every 4 years, they talk big, they promise big, and they deliver small. And I think what we've seen in this country is that we don't really make big change until our backs are totally against the wall. Our grandparents' generation did that. We saw in the Civil Rights Movement. Big change didn't come until we saw African Americans being mowed down on the streets, being beat into within inches of their lives. And so I think that we needed this wake-up call, not just for African Americans, but for Americans, more generally, who are frustrated with a Washington that really seems focused on inside baseball and not really responding to the biggest needs of Americans.
So, Chris, I see you sort of nodding in agreement with some of the things that David has said. How are you feeling about this Trump presidency? This is clearly a victory for you.
Well, it's a victory overall. I mean, I'm not a Donald Trump supporter. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative who tends to vote Republican primarily because at this point in time, the Republican Party tends to line up more with my values and views. But to talk on what David was speaking about, what you have is inside baseball. Most people in America are looking and saying, what's really going on in D.C.? I get phone calls from family and friends, and they're saying, well, what's going on? And I tell them, I don't know. I live in a bubble. You know, if you live here in Washington, D.C., you're in a bubble. You see prosperity here in D.C., but I do travel outside of the area all the time, and I go to North Carolina, I'm in Pennsylvania, I'm all over the country on a regular basis, and I see vacancies, and I see all the problems that are going on that people here don't really see. You know, we see, oh, our home value dropped a little bit, you know, but people still have jobs. There's no jobs out there when 96 million people or more are out of work. And so I think to ask us what's going on is probably not the right question, and we're not the right people to be asking that question because we live in this insulated bubble.
Well, speaking of this insulated bubble, this is something that Donald Trump said that, you know, he wanted to basically blow up. He wanted to change what has been going on historically in Washington. But we're already sort of seeing a shift in what he said he wanted to do and what's actually happening. And I'm specifically talking about him beating this drum of anti-corruption as he was going through the campaign cycle. But, you know, he's filling his transition team with some of the very people, Washington insiders, lobbyists, that he said that he didn't want to be part of this ball game. So, Chris, you know, I'm wondering to you, how much is this a sign that he won't live up to some of the promises that he has made?
It's not a surprise at all. I mean, there are plenty of those of us who are conservatives who there was a war basically on the right, whether the Trump supporters and never Trump supporters. I wasn't necessarily a never Trump supporter, but I looked at him very warily, just because I'm like, he's never expressed anything that lines up with what conservatives believe. You know, and he's never been a conservative. So none of this is surprising at all to me. Those of us who celebrated at his election, we did so because it was a slap in the face to the liberal media, who basically were constantly telling everybody, oh, he can't win, and oh, Hillary's a shoo-in. And we're like, okay, you don't know about the majority of the country, or at least a good portion of the country, who don't want the Clintons and don't, you know, we all understood that Hillary Clinton was corrupt to the core, and she wasn't a great candidate. That the fact that she even got as many votes as she did, it was because she was carried, dragged, propped up to the finish line by the media.
And if I could jump in here, I mean, I think what we saw with Donald Trump is just a very skilled businessman and marketer. He saw a void in the market. He saw a product that needed to be provided. He created it, he packaged it, and then most brilliantly, he found somebody else to pay for the marketing, i.e. the media. Yeah. So, I mean, the question of whether he'll come back a little bit on his promises, I don't think it's a question. I think he did what he had to do to get elected.
You are the deal.
That's right. That's right. The guy told you who he was, what he's about, and then he went out and did it. And I think it surprised a lot of folks, but it really speaks to the frustration amongst Americans right now.
So that goes to this issue, too, of really who Donald Trump is. You know, is he this hardcore Republican conservative? Is he something that's slightly different? And, you know, I'm thinking of some of the policies that he's talked about wanting to upend, trade, the Affordable Care Act. He's not planning now on ripping up the Iran deal, something that he railed against. What do you, David, make of what could potentially be seen as his softening stance as he enters the White House?
Well, I think there's a difference between running for president and being president. We heard that from Barack Obama and others. He now has to govern. And so the idea that he's going to rip up NAFTA, I mean, it sounds good. We have businesses and you have farmers who are relying on channels that have been in place for a long time because of NAFTA. The other thing is, are you going to go to Mexico and say, okay, we're ripping up NAFTA, and by the way, you're going to build a wall? I mean, the politics become a little bit more complicated when you're actually having to make these deals. I think you're going to see him pull back on a lot of things, not just the Affordable Care Act. I think he's not going to actually try to rip up NAFTA. You know, TPP kind of basically died yesterday, I think, with Mitch McConnell saying that we're not going to consider it. So he's now in a different reality. Right? He was kind of living in the Donald Trump virtual reality. Now he's in kind of the Washington reality, and it's about making deals. So I think he'll be effective, right? I think it's important for Democrats now. I know, speaking with a lot of friends, they're kind of in shock and they're angry. And I tell them, we've got to now give Donald Trump an opportunity to make good on his promises. He's made a lot, right? He said that he's going to invest in African-American communities. He's going to improve their lives, create jobs. Let's see what he does, but let's hold him accountable, too.
So, Chris, what do you make of where he's going to place those priorities? What does he need to do when he comes into office?
Well, as David was talking about, and I mentioned this Tuesday when you guys had me on Tuesday, that the voter turnout among African Americans was not going to be as high as people thought it was going to be, and those who did turn out to vote were not going to be as hardcore Hillary as people thought. And a lot of that had to come down to economic issues in those battleground states like Michigan and Ohio and all those places he was not supposed to win. Well, there's large percentages of African Americans and other minorities who are in those lower income brackets who are working the type of jobs where those industries have gone away. And if he wants to have their support, help bring those jobs back. And he has to go that route. I mean, if you want, it was economics. At the end of the day, people voted with their pocketbook because they knew that Hillary Clinton was going to be a continuation of all the things that did not work for 8 years under Obama. Nothing got better for African Americans or other minorities during the past 8 years under Obama.
Let me jump in. I don't think it's accurate to say that nothing got better for African Americans, right? And I'll agree with you. You know, if you look at things like foreclosure rates, those numbers are disproportionately high for African Americans. You look at the loss of wealth, disproportionately high among African Americans. But, you know, at the end of the day, we had a black president. Yes. And I don't think you can discount the meaning of that, right? Looking forward in generations, there will be children who have only known African-American president, right, in their lives when they got to vote next time around. So, I mean, I think if you look at the long-term kind of consequences of a Barack Obama presidency, there will be lots of good. Now, I do think that we kind of dropped the ball in a lot of things. And in my book, I talk about that. Really, I think my book is kind of an articulation of how we got to now. And I think it's been not just Barack Obama, right, but it's also been a failure on the part of the Democratic Party establishment.
That's certainly been a criticism.
Right, and also the people who make up the party, and particularly African Americans, I'm going to be honest, to hold this president accountable.
Gentlemen, it has been an enlightening discussion. We're going to have to leave it there. David, Chris, thank you so much for joining me. Part of the postmortem following Tuesday's election has been questioning how the polls got it so wrong. They particularly underestimated the level of support that Trump had in blue-collar areas that have long been reliably Democratic. Our correspondent, Yolo Opdavat, has been visiting some of those areas, and he joins me now from Philadelphia. Yolo?
Well, as you remember on election night, Tatiana, one of the most eagerly awaited results was the one here in Pennsylvania. And it is an important result because, of course, this is a traditionally blue, a traditionally Democrat state, and there are 20 electoral votes. Now, those votes, like some of the other important swing states, went to Donald Trump. And when you add up Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, 30 big votes there in the Electoral College for Donald Trump. So that made a difference. So if Pennsylvania went red and Republican on Tuesday and the early hours of Wednesday, it was predominantly blue in this city, in Philadelphia, and that stayed because the majority of people here, as usual, voted for the Democrats and for Hillary Clinton. But of the almost 70 districts or political wards in this city, 3 of them, for the first time, voted in a majority for Donald Trump and for the Republicans. That didn't happen in 2012 with Mitt Romney. So we went to one of those wards, Ward 26 in southern Philadelphia, one of the less affluent areas, to ask people why did they switch their vote from Democrat to Republican.
He said it right out, and it's exactly the way I felt about a lot of issues on the thing, okay? Whether he said build a wall, okay, build a wall. That's fine. I have no problem with that. Let people come in legally. That's why we have rules. That's why we have laws. And the other side was circumventing those laws. I mean, you could say so many things about Trump, whether it's bad or good. The man didn't have to give up his billionaire lifestyle. He didn't have to do this. He felt a need inside. He felt something, a wrong was there, and he had to right it.
He didn't have the big corporations in his back pocket, and so I think he sincerely wants to help America.
So you're one of these, probably a large percentage of people who voted Democrat last time, but you switched to Republican.
Yes, I think there was just too much in Hillary's closet that turned me off to her.
What made you change?
Just everything that was going on. What's going on in the city, everything, you know, what's going on in the world. You know, we weren't getting no justice with him. Bottom line.
So you decided that this time round...
We need a change. Straight up, we need a change.
And what made you decide to vote for Trump, and why did you vote for that change?
I just wanted Trump in there. You know, the one that was in Obama, I mean, he didn't help us out. He buried us. You know, as far as I'm concerned, he buried us.
Obama, I'm telling you, 8 years, if you lived here, 8 years of this, that's enough. Like, I'll give you one thing for example. Every time a black person was shot and killed by police, he'll come out and say, oh, this has got to stop. Every time a white person was shot and killed, never heard a peep from him.
Yep.
More white people were killed by police than blacks.
You don't hear about it.
You don't hear a peep about it here, not one peep. The news only shows you what they want you to see.
It wasn't a matter of Democrat versus Republican. It was a matter of right and wrong. There was a lot of corruption in the government. A lot of things being pay for play, whatever you want to call that, payola, as they said in the radio business years ago. But it was just time for a change.
So, not a matter of Republican against Democrat, but a question of right or wrong. And those views were entrenched. Now, admittedly, that was a small sample in a small area of Philadelphia, but it does give a kind of a sense of the frustration and the anger and the resentment that those men talked about. Now, there were other people who were pro-Democrat and voted Democrat in that ward as well, but that ward voted in a majority, about 51.5% in favor of Donald Trump. So they said it's time for a change. Now, what's interesting, there was a demonstration here last night, and around 1,500 people, young adults mostly, students, they marched on the streets calling for a change because they felt that this vote on Tuesday marks them out for a difficult 4 years. So there you have the divide. The huge divide, even in a city like Philadelphia, which has voted predominantly Democratic in the past few decades. And I think that in those voices we hear the anger of a certain class of people in America and why they decided to switch their votes this time round. Tatiana.
Certainly interesting stuff, Yolo. Thank you very much. I am now joined by Lindsay Perry. She is the former Deputy Press Secretary for Dr. Ben Carson. He is the neurosurgeon who went up against Donald Trump in the primaries and who has since become a key Trump supporter. I also have with me our very own Kilmeny Dukart. She has been on the campaign trail with Donald Trump, and she's been following all the twists and turns of this election. And, you know, I want to start with you, Lindsay. You are a communications expert. Donald Trump has made some pretty harsh comments about just about everybody, women, Hispanics, Black Americans. How does he turn what has been widely seen as a divisive message into something that's unifying, especially when the country is so split, especially when it comes to him?
Yes, I definitely, well, first, thanks for having me. But I definitely believe that it's going to be very difficult for him to try to unite the country with every single tweet that we've seen, with the ignorant comments about sexual assault and building a wall and Muslims. But at the end of the day, I think that he spoke to his base. A lot of people don't understand that in order for him to win the Republican nomination, he had to speak to a specific type of voter. And unfortunately, there's a lot of ignorance out there, and people believe exactly what he was saying. I think that it was strategic. His message was strategic. I don't necessarily think he believes everything that he said. I think that that was a strategic move to win that nomination. And now we're going to see perhaps the real Trump. A lot of people don't understand Donald Trump has been running for president for the past 30 years. If you look on YouTube, he's been talking since he was, 30, 42, about the same issues. And if it ever got to the point where he felt that he needed to step in and run, he would do so. But he knew that he had to run as a Republican. So I think that he played the game and he played it well. I'm not a Trump supporter, but he played it well.
Kilmeny, you were at a lot of these rallies. I mean, what did you see in terms of some of this divisive language? Was it like what was portrayed in the media?
You know, there are two very defining moments in the final weeks leading up to this campaign. When we were in North Carolina, U.S. President Barack Obama was at a rally in North Carolina. And this was the rally where there was an actual Trump protester that revealed himself in the crowd. And it took President Obama a good several minutes to quiet everybody down. And he said, this man is not doing anything wrong. He's exercising his right to free speech. But that moment of tension where people were booing this protester really should have foreshadowed, I think, a lot of the divisions that we're seeing post-election. You know, November 9th, the day after Trump was elected the 45th president of the United States, I was walking down Fifth Avenue in front of Trump Tower, and I saw Clinton supporters basically attacking Trump supporters, calling them racist, sexist, and they don't want to be associated with that language, because you have to understand that he did have his core base, but he also had people who were tired of the status quo. They didn't want another 4 years of Barack Obama.
I agree with that, but I also want to say this. Donald Trump is not the president-elect of the divide. We've been divided. And I think that this just exposes a lot of truths that our country has been going through for the past 50 years, perhaps even more. So this is a fester. And to blame it and put it all on Donald, I think he exposed it. And I also agree with you. People are sick and tired of being sick and tired, to quote Fannie Lou Hamer.
Fannie Lou Hamer.
And so not just, and this is not just white, poor white people, or just white, as some people will call white supremacists. These are also black people in rural counties. I'm from Toledo, Ohio, and I know that people are tired of looking in their cities and it's being depressed. Businesses are closing. People want jobs. People want money. And so Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party, they've promised, they've talked a good game, but they have delivered nothing. So Donald Trump, he's talked a good game to his base, but he also hasn't talked a good game. Let's see what he can deliver, because talk is nothing without action.
So you're absolutely right that in terms of what the electorate wants, he is speaking to a large swath of people, but hasn't his language also been so divisive that that sort of maybe cancels that out?
I don't think so. I don't think that his language has been that divisive to where it can't turn around. As president-elect and as our future president, he has to do a really good job at unifying us and showing that he is the president of all Americans. And as Americans, we have a responsibility to take care of one another, to not call each other names. We have a responsibility to come together. So it's not all on him, it's on us and some of the leadership that already stands in the Congress and even our community leaders. They need to speak up. The people in the media, they need to stop this rhetoric of divisiveness. The campaign is over, and they need to say, hey guys, let's come together. Let's work together, because it can't go on like this.
Lindsay, you bring up an interesting point, because there's two tweets from Donald Trump following these protests that we've seen across the country. The first thing that he tweeted out was that these are professional protesters incited by the media. So we get a glimpse of the old Donald Trump, and then we see him come out and say, look at these groups, look at this passion for democracy. We're going to bring everybody together. So we do see a little bit of the internal struggle with Donald Trump there.
Yeah, well, to say this, I don't know if you guys believe in zodiac signs, but he is a Gemini. And and I found that out. I said, oh my goodness, my cousin is a Gemini. He has two different sides, but we will have to see. We will have to see.
And to that point, these two different sides, I'm wondering, is that part of what the media got wrong, not seeing Donald Trump in his entirety? You're nodding here, so.
Yes, absolutely. I think that they saw ratings off of promoting a message about racism and all the isms that we can think about. The media likes to focus on that, and the people focused on that, but they completely surpassed the economic depression that people are facing. So get out of your feelings and really think about your pocket, because that is what people voted on, and that's it at the end of the day.
Speaking of voting, you did not vote for Hillary Clinton. Quick
Absolutely
answer,
not.
are you part of the reason we're at this Trump presidency? Quick answer.
Am I part of the reason? Probably. Or no. No, I'm not. I'm not part of the reason, but I did not vote for Hillary and I did not vote for Trump. I wrote someone in, but I would rather see what this country can be than to know I'm going to stay in the same position forever.
Fantastic. So. Ladies, thanks to both of you for joining me. I really appreciate it. And next, that brings us to the end of this special program on the election of Donald Trump. It's been a dramatic week here in U.S. politics, and with so much uncertainty surrounding the Trump presidency, the drama looks like it is set to continue. We leave you now with some of the sounds and images from the past few days. From me, Tatiana Anderson, and the whole team here in Washington, thank you for watching.
All of my periods ask me the same question. Are we going to vote them? No! Why not? Because love trumps hate. Let me hear you. Love trumps hate.
I think it speaks to the disenfranchisement of the people that someone like him could be seen as offering anything to the masses. I mean, I think Hillary's no savior either. I think she has an imperialist track record. I think she's a very dangerous candidate, but I think Donald Trump's ability to mobilize perhaps Latin racist thoughts is incredibly terrifying.
Donald J. Trump, no one thought that he could do it, but he's pulled it off.
I'm happy. I'm pumped. I mean, I'm ready to see this country get back on track.
We are tired of the corruption at all levels.
We know that there's going to be a change now in America.